first quiz that you're going to take actually next week is going to be on being able to identify primary versus secondary research. This is a single concept, and what you're going to have to do is understand the definition and be able to identify specific articles, why they are, why they are not primary research. All right. If you think about a newspaper story, if it's a firsthand eyewitness story, it's basically a primary source article. If you think about an editorial, that's not primary source. You're not doing primary investigation in an article like that. The same kind of idea applies to history or to educational research. So in history, it would be a primary source if I had a diary of a soldier in the Civil War. However, if I was looking at the author of a textbook on the Civil War, or the author a book covering many years of the Civil War, those would be secondary sources. Okay, here's a more official definition of primary research. A primary source is an original study, document, object, or eyewitness account. In other words, this is the source where any given information first appeared. That's a key idea. For instance, if a scientific study is performed, the primary source is the initial report that is prepared by the scientist who performed the research. A secondary source, in contrast, is something that may use that after the fact. So a secondary source is a document that is written about the primary source. These are often documents that report, analyze, discuss, or interpret primary sources. So if I'm an educational researcher and I'm collecting original data and I'm the first one to report on that original data, then that report that I produce is considered primary source research. If I'm an educational researcher and what I do is collect the reports of a number of other educational researchers, that's considered secondary research. If you as a student write a paper without collecting original primary data yourself, that paper you write is a secondary source. If you do original research, collecting your own data for the first time, and I'm not talking about data that you would get by reading stuff in books, but by maybe surveying students or analyzing the work of students, that would be primary research. All right. I'm going to give you a couple examples, let you think about them while the video is going on, and you can check your understanding. And then we're going to hopefully give you a little practice with preparing for the quiz by giving you a practice quiz in D2L. Right? All right. Two examples. Sort of what I just said. If I perform a survey of students and report the results in a paper or an essay, then it's primary research. However, if I write a literature analysis paper quoting somebody else who did their own survey of students, that's secondary research, right? All right. So I'll ask you to think about each of these examples, and I'll tell you the answer. Educational psychology textbook, primary or secondary? A science poster created by a high school student about an experiment that they conducted, primary or secondary? An article published in the journal Reading Research. A review of the literature done as the first chapter of a master's thesis. All right, you can pause the video if you need to while you think about these. Right, educational psychology textbook, definitely a secondary source. Those kind of textbooks accumulate all kinds of sources from other primary sources as the basis of their writing. Science poster, primary research by that student. Article published in the Journal of Reading Research. The answer is I didn't give you enough information. Most journals, and including specifically the Reading Research Journal, publish both secondary and primary source articles. A review of the literature done as the first chapter of a master's thesis. Hope you all got that right. That's secondary research because it's not primary source research collected by the student that's doing that. All right. Now, mostly the way that I'm going to quiz you on this is by giving you an abstract of an article and asking you to figure out if it's primary or secondary. So some of the things that you would look for is description of participants. If the article is describing the participants of a study, you know it's primary research because they're collecting the original data. If the article instead describes in the abstract the studies that were looked at as part of this article, you know it's somebody synthesizing previous research and it's secondary research. If there's reference to data collection methods like surveying or interviewing or giving tests out, it's primary research because the author's collecting original data. Another way you can tell is if there's a description of the method of analyzing the data. However, that particular way is not quite as foolproof as the data collection because sometimes researchers will take a very systematic approach to analyzing previous research. So it's really the data collection that's the most important. All right. I'm going to give you two abstract examples and we'll see how you do here. I'm going to ask you to pause the video, read this, and then see what you think, and then I'll give you the answer. All right, the answer here is it's secondary research. You can kind of infer they're saying that concludes that more research finds. So they're talking about other people's research. This is secondary. All right, pause the video, look at this. All right, the answer is this is primary. Students who received a vocabulary list, talking about original participants, and this was original data collected, so this is a primary source article. All right, hope that makes sense, and you can test yourself with the quiz that I'm going to put up in a